One of the quotes I like a lot that is from an advertisement, would you believe? I'll open with a picture. This is a picture of Robert Jarvik, who was a leader in medicine. This is from Esquire way back in 1984, way back before your time at university, who was a leader in new procedures. Leaders are visionaries with a poorly developed sense of fear and no concept of the odds against them. They make the impossible happen. Isn't that a wonderful quote? And that's why I've kept it. And this is just literally from an ad copy, and it's one that struck me in terms of leadership traits. One of the things, did any of you watch the press coverage recently about the regional policy conference that was here in West Michigan? There was coverage in the Grand Rapids Press and elsewhere. One of the speakers, in fact, the wrap-up speaker, was Rich DeVos, well known to all of us, Rich DeVos Sr., who talked about leadership from his perspective. And by the way, this is a sidebar, Leaves, as this goes forward. This is something that maybe future classes might want to think about. We'd have to figure a special rate because it was a pretty high ticket event, but I bet we could talk the leaders, the planners, into having a group like this be participants in it, because it was a chance to look at the economy, to look at the major issues facing us. It was a pretty sobering expression. But one of the things that Rich DeVos talked about was leaders setting the tone or the atmosphere in an organization or a community. And I think that was a really interesting way to start. And I'm going to just jot a few things here on this sheet, which obviously doesn't have a firm backing. Does that make sense for you? And I'm going to start the quiz part of the program here now, in terms of asking, do you have a sense of what a leader can do in setting a tone, or whether as you look at our presidential candidates or as you look at your university leaders, what do you see in a leader's responsibility for setting a tone? Setting a stage, or our governor, is that an easier way, maybe putting aside the presidential?
Now, I told Elaine that you all were very chatty.
I told him I didn't plan a big, long lecture. I want to have a conversation.
Well, they could set the tone. I'm just going to guess on this one.
Sure.
They could, when they come to their position, they could make the people around them feel, okay, this is a family, or this is a community, of how we're going to work together instead of me telling you what to do. Or they could say it the other way, I'm here, I'm the boss.
Right.
I'll tell you what to do and want this to get done. So it depends on how they make the people around them feel, depends on how the environment can be, their work environment.
You know, yes, that's right. And you just said another important thing that leads into another thing, which is, in a sense, they build a team, or a feeling of a team, in the sense of in a community, that it's us together. And when we think about this financial crisis facing our country right now, one of the challenges for our candidates, whoever's elected, is to make us all feel that we're a part of it, that we can be a part of a solution. And there's some of the things that have been talked about, even remembering during World War II, people buying savings bonds has been one of the things that's been touted. And that means that people feel a sense of urgency, not to despair, but to say, well, I can buy a bond and I can contribute to this bailout, and I can then have a piece that will bring money to me. And that's exactly what was done in World War II, to raise funds for the effort. And so that having the tone that's set, then having building a team or a feeling of participation and being a member of something. So I thought that was an interesting thing. Another thing that DeVos said that fits into other things that I've talked about is communication. And certainly what we're watching and we've got a governor who's a strong communicator. Remember the town meetings when she traveled around the state? For those of you who are from Michigan, I know some of you are from out of state and wouldn't recall that. But the issue of ability to communicate is just really key. And that's, again, partly how the buy-in. So in other words, of setting a tone and communicating about it is the way that you bring people in, the way that one engages them as a factor. One of the other things that, as I've looked at the management and leadership issue, what a leader has to do, and that's certainly what we're dealing with now in this election campaign because of the financial situation facing us, is Warren Bennett calls this a competency of leadership, the management of attention. In other words, through that communication ability, you've got to get people's attention. And I would say that probably right now, they've got our attention. Wouldn't that be so? with the kind of situation. So I think that's actually helping the candidates in terms of we're all paying a lot more attention because we have a concern. But it's drawing people to us. And a part of that is, and what are we looking for? What would be the V word? What would be a V word that we're looking for? Vision, absolutely. And actually, going beyond that, what we're looking for is answers, or a solution, or a strategy, not to solve it overnight. And maybe some of that will start to come out in the next few weeks. This has all been happening very fast. But this applies in any kind of an organization, whether it's the president of your university who has to set a vision, set a tone, try to get people to buy in, communicate about that, get people to focus in terms of if it's a problem. The management of attention is a really important area. Do any of you know the boiled frog story? Do you know about the boiled frog? Frogs are very nice animals, I know, but one of the situations and the most famous example of this is the Chrysler bailout when Lee Iacocca was the leader of was the president of Chrysler. The story I've heard most often told when I was at the Michigan Business School, and Noel Tishy, one of the faculty, used to tell this to a lot of executive groups. Gleaves, do you know the boiled frog story?
You mean with 1 degree at a time?
Yeah, okay. All right. I figured you'd have to know this. At any rate, what it is that if a frog is put in a pot of water, and that pot of water is put on the stove, and the burner is lit, that water will gradually heat up, and the frog will tend to die right in the water because it doesn't sort of see what's happening. It's kind of warming up, and all of a sudden it's cooked, okay? The boiled frog phenomenon is that if you heat that water first, in other words, if you have a crisis, and in the case of Chrysler, it was failing, and then you throw that frog into that pot of boiling water, it jumps out, and it actually then survives because it got its attention really, really fast. And so that's one of the problems in terms of a lot of the corporate environment is when problems develop very slowly. And I would say for us, maybe even though some handwriting was on the wall about these economic issues, it was happening pretty gradually. And all of a sudden, our attention is gotten. All of a sudden, we're tracking on something that people had been talking about for a couple of years, but not doing anything about. And so that management of attention is an important thing. Another thing that Bennis talks about is the management of meaning. And that it comes back to the communication of the vision, in other words, of sharing what something is all about, to communicate the dream or the vision, to get people in alignment, because only then can you move forward. Another one, what would be a T word that would fit here? If you were to say, what are we looking for in leaders? Trust. Yes, absolutely. And again, some of it in this election, because it's current, I wouldn't probably talk about it that way if we were giving this talk at a different point in time. But we're all looking for somebody we can believe or we can trust. Even if they don't have it all figured out right now, we are really going to be voting for a human being that we can believe in and that we can then be willing to follow. And the other thing, and I mentioned this in that opening remarks from the Broder piece, is the management of self or the knowledge of self. In other words, knowing who you are, what you're good at, what you're not, because where some of our prior leaders in various settings get into trouble is because they don't really understand what they're good at or what they're not. So one of the things I pray for is a leader who can let go of things that he knows or she knows that are not as good at. What other kinds of things, if I were turning this to you in terms of what you want in leaders. Why don't you fill in page 2?
I think one quality would be temperament. If you're cool-headed or rash, or calculated.
Has to do with balance. Has to do with bringing people together. Has to do with not losing one's cool at a meeting, but also listening. In fact, that'd be another one I'd almost put down, an L word. What other kinds of things?
Confidence.
In self or building in others? You want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I don't think any of us are going to follow somebody who doesn't have confidence in themselves or in us. I mean, it has to be confidence in both. They have to be confident in what they're saying and what they're believing in, what they're planning on doing.